The wife refused to spend a passionate night, so the husband, filled with emotions, entered the maid's room. "Hi, my very beautiful, loyal and great family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter's Stories. Today I come to you with a heavy heart. I'm deeply upset because YouTube has frozen my channel. My views are down by 95%. I've been working so hard, pouring my soul into these stories, and I reached out asking for a little help, just to like and share. But sadly, most of my family ignored that call. If my words ever hurt you, I'm truly sorry. I promise I won't ask again. Maybe it's just my luck. Still, I won't stop giving my best. But before we begin today's story, let me offer something from the bottom of my heart. A beautiful prayer for my family. May peace surround your homes like gentle wind through trees. May your hearts be filled with light, no matter how dark the world feels. May love follow you like your own shadow, always there even when unseen. And may your dreams find the wings they need to fly. A prayer for sad hearts. To anyone hurting, feeling lost or weary, may strength rise in you again. May hope quietly whisper, "You're not alone." And may joy, even in small drops, return to you like rain after drought. Now, with a heavy heart, let's begin today's story. Jordan Castriel stood at the vast window of his penthouse office, watching the city lights twinkle beneath him like fallen stars. At 42, he had everything a man could want: a thriving empire, wealth beyond measure, and a wife whose beauty turned heads wherever they went. Everything except the one thing his heart truly yearned for: love. His phone buzzed with a notification. Their anniversary dinner reservation was in an hour. Jordan smiled softly, hoping tonight might be different. Perhaps tonight, Vivian would look at him the way she once did, before disappointment and resentment had carved a canyon between them. He entered their mansion, carrying a bouquet of rare orchids, Vivian's favorites. The marble foyer echoed with his footsteps as he called out her name. "In here," came her cool response from the living room. Vivian lounged on their designer sofa, still in her yoga attire, scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up when he entered. "Happy anniversary, my love," Jordan said, extending the flowers toward her with a warm smile that reached his amber eyes. 10 years today." Vivian glanced at the bouquet, her perfect features arranged in an expression of practiced politeness. "You remembered? How thoughtful." The flowers remained suspended between them until Jordan gently placed them on the coffee table. "I made reservations at Lumiere, your favorite." "Cancel them," she said, finally putting down her phone. "The Prestons invited us to their yacht party. Much more appropriate for people of our standing, don't you think?" Jordan's smile faltered. "I thought we might spend the evening just us two. We haven't had a proper conversation in weeks." "What is there to talk about, Jordan?" Vivian's voice held an edge that had become all too familiar. "Another year passed without you giving me what I want." The weight of unspoken accusations hung between them. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of trying for a child, 10 years of specialists and treatments and hope slowly curdling into blame. "The doctor said it could be either of us," he said softly. "Maybe we could look into other options. Adoption, perhaps?" Vivian's laugh was brittle. "And parade someone else's child as a Castriel heir? Don't be ridiculous." Jordan sat beside her, reaching for her hand. She allowed the contact, but remained rigid. "Vivi, we used to be happy. Remember our honeymoon in Bali? How we talked about building a life filled with joy, not just possessions." For a moment, something flickered in Vivian's eyes, a ghost of the woman he'd fallen in love with. Then it vanished, replaced by the cold shell she'd become. "That was before I realized you couldn't fulfill your basic duty as a husband," she said, pulling her hand away. "Before I became the object of pity at every social gathering." Poor Vivian, still no children. "I never meant to hurt you," Jordan whispered, his heart breaking anew. "I've tried everything." "Not everything," she cut in, standing abruptly. The Andersons' son was conceived through some cutting-edge treatment in Switzerland. I've already contacted the clinic. You're scheduled for tests next month. You made medical appointments without discussing it with me? Jordan's voice held rare displeasure. Because you'd find some excuse not to go, Vivian snapped. Always too busy with your precious company to address what truly matters. Jordan ran a hand through his dark hair. My work provides the lifestyle you refuse to live without, Vivian. And what good is all this? She gestured around their immaculate home. If I can't have the one thing every woman deserves. The silence that followed was deafening. 10 years of the same argument, circling like vultures around the carcass of their marriage. I'm going to change, Vivian finally said. We'll attend the Prestons' party. At least there I won't have to pretend to be happily celebrating this farce of a marriage. Jordan watched her ascend the grand staircase, each step taking her further from the life they'd once dreamed of building together. He loosened his tie, feeling suffocated by more than just the fabric. The sound of movement in the kitchen drew his attention. Seeking any distraction from the hollow ache in his chest, Jordan followed it. Emerson Rhodes was arranging fresh flowers in a crystal vase, her movements graceful and purposeful. At 28, she'd been managing their household for nearly 3 years, bringing order and warmth to the cold mansion. Mr. Castriel, she said, looking up with a gentle smile that reached her kind brown eyes. I didn't hear you come in. Something in Jordan's chest loosened at the simple warmth in her voice. Please, it's Jordan. After 3 years, I think we can drop the formalities. Emerson tucked a strand of her curly hair behind her ear, her dark skin glowing under the kitchen lights. Old habits, she said with a small shrug. These just arrived for Mrs. Castriel from the Montgomerys. Jordan glanced at the elaborate flower arrangement. More beautiful than the ones I brought, I'm sure. Something in his tone made Emerson pause her work. She looked at him properly, noticing the sadness etched around his eyes, the slump in shoulders that usually stood proud. I doubt that, she said softly. You always choose flowers with meaning, not just for show. The simple observation that someone had noticed his efforts warmed something cold inside him. Thank you, Emerson. Their eyes met for a moment too long before she looked away, focusing intently on adjusting a lily. Will you be dining in tonight? I could prepare something. No, we're attending a party, Jordan said, the words tasting bitter. Anniversary plans changed. Emerson nodded, her expression carefully neutral, but Jordan caught a flash of something in her eyes. Was it sympathy? Happy anniversary, she offered, though the words seemed to carry a question. Jordan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. 10 years. A significant milestone, she said, then added more softly, I hope it brings you joy. The simple, sincere wish, so different from the cold interactions he'd grown accustomed to, caught Jordan off guard. Thank you, he managed, surprised by the sudden tightness in his throat. Later that night, returning from a party where Vivian had flirted with everyone but him, Jordan found himself alone again. Vivian had claimed a headache and retreated to her separate bedroom, an arrangement that had begun as temporary during her fertility treatments, but had somehow become permanent. Don't even think about coming to my room tonight, she'd hissed, as they entered the house. I need actual rest, not another disappointing reminder of what you can't give me. Now, in the silence of his home office, Jordan poured himself a glass of scotch and stared at their wedding photo. Where had they gone? Wrong? When had Vivian's ambition for the perfect life overridden their love? Or had it always been there, masked by passion and novelty? A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Emerson stood in the doorway, hesitant. Forgive the intrusion, she said. I'm heading home, but wanted to check if you needed anything before I go. In that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of his anniversary and the echoing emptiness of his marriage, Jordan recognized the simple kindness for the precious thing it was. "No, thank you, Emerson," he said quietly. "Have a good night." She nodded and turned to leave, but paused. "Mr. Castriel, Jordan, whatever you're going through, this too shall pass." As she disappeared down the hallway, Jordan felt something shift inside him. In a house full of expensive things, it was the first time in years he'd felt seen as a person rather than a provider or a disappointment. He didn't know then how prophetic her words would be, or that within weeks a simple mistake would change both their lives forever. Chapter 2. Moonlit Collision. 4 weeks. It had been 4 weeks since Vivian had banished Jordan from her bedroom, from her life in all but appearance. 4 weeks of increasing tension, of silent dinners and cold shoulders. 4 weeks of Jordan throwing himself into work, staying at the office until midnight, anything to avoid the Arctic atmosphere of the mansion they called home. Tonight, as rain lashed against the windows of his office, Jordan finally closed his laptop at 1 a.m. His eyes burned from staring at financial projections, his body ached from too many hours in his chair, and his heart had grown numb with loneliness. The drive home through the storm matched his turbulent thoughts. He'd given Vivian everything, his devotion, his patience, his unwavering support through her increasingly cruel accusations. Yet it was never enough. Nothing could fill the void left by the children they couldn't conceive. The mansion was dark when he arrived, save for the security lights illuminating the curved driveway. Jordan entered quietly, not bothering with lights. He knew every inch of this beautiful prison, could navigate it blindfolded. He climbed the sweeping staircase, loosening his tie, his thoughts a tangled mess of regret and resignation. The long hallway of the East Wing stretched before him, lined with guest rooms. Since Vivian's latest edict, "Stay away from me until you agree to the Swiss procedure," he'd been sleeping in the blue guest suite at the far end. Jordan moved by memory, exhaustion weighing his steps. The storm had intensified, occasional flashes of lightning briefly illuminating the corridor through the tall windows. He reached what he thought was his temporary bedroom door and turned the handle, entering during a particularly dark pause between lightning strikes. The room felt different somehow, warmer, with a subtle floral scent he didn't recognize. Too tired to question it, Jordan began unbuttoning his shirt as he moved toward where he knew the bed would be. A flash of lightning revealed his mistake. This wasn't his room at all. The silhouette of a person sitting up in bed made his heart hammer against his ribs. "Who's there?" came a familiar voice tinged with alarm. "Emerson." Jordan froze, suddenly, wide awake. "I'm so sorry. I thought this was my room. The storm. I got disoriented." Another flash illuminated her face, showing surprise replacing fear. "Mr. Castriel, Jordan, let me turn on the light." "No, please don't," he said quickly, embarrassment flooding him. "I'll just go. I apologize for disturbing you." But as he turned to leave, the room plunged into complete darkness. The storm had knocked out the power. "Perfect timing," Emerson said with a nervous laugh. "Do you need help finding your way out?" "I should be able to," Jordan began, but as he moved toward where he thought the door was, he collided with something solid, a dresser that wasn't there in his guest room. A small crash followed as something fell to the floor. "Hold on," Emerson said. "Let me help before you break something else." He heard rustling, then sensed her presence near him. Her hand found his arm in the darkness, warm through the fabric of his shirt. "This way," she said softly, guiding him. A vivid flash of lightning illuminated the entire room for a split second, freezing the moment in stark relief. Jordan's rumpled business attire, his tired face, and Emerson in a simple silk nightgown that clung to curves he'd never allowed himself to notice before. Their eyes met in that electric instant, an unspoken current passing between them. Thunder crashed directly overhead, making Emerson jump. Her hand tightened on his arm, and suddenly they were standing too close, her warmth radiating against him. In the darkness. "I should go," Jordan whispered, but didn't move. "Yes," Emerson agreed, her voice equally soft. Yet her hand remained on his arm, a gentle pressure that anchored him in the darkness. "Emerson, The words died in his throat as another flash revealed her face tilted up toward his, eyes wide and questioning. Neither could say who moved first. Perhaps they both did, drawn together like magnets finally freed from restraint. His lips found hers in the darkness, tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. Her answer came in the softening of her mouth under his, in the quiet sigh that escaped her. Jordan pulled back, reason briefly asserting itself. "We shouldn't." "I know," she whispered, her breath warm against his lips. The next kiss erased all. Thought, years of loneliness, of touch without tenderness, of physical contact without emotional connection. It all fell away as Emerson's arms wound around his neck, pulling him closer. "Tell me to stop," Jordan murmured against her throat, giving her an escape even as his hands skimmed the silk covering her waist. Instead of answering, she guided him toward the bed, her movements sure in the familiar space. When the backs of her knees hit the mattress, she paused, her hands framing his face. "Are you sure?" she asked, reversing their roles, offering him the choice. In answer, Jordan kissed her deeply, pouring years of unspent emotion into the connection. Her response was immediate, passionate without being desperate, tender without being timid. They fell together onto the bed, the storm providing a symphony to their movements. What happened between them was nothing like the mechanical, scheduled intimacy Jordan had known in recent years. Emerson's touch healed something broken inside. Him, each caress an affirmation, each kiss a revelation. He explored her body with reverent hands, discovering what made her breath catch, what drew those soft sounds from her throat. "Jordan," she whispered his name like a prayer as they moved together, and he realized it was the first time in years someone had said his name with genuine emotion. In the darkness, with rain lashing against the windows and thunder rolling overhead, they created their own storm, equally powerful but infinitely more healing. When they finally lay spent in each other's arms, the real storm had begun to wane, occasional flashes of lightning still illuminating their entwined forms. "I never meant for this to happen," Jordan said softly, stroking her arm as she rested, her head on his chest. "Neither did I," Emerson replied, her fingers tracing patterns on his skin. "But I can't bring myself to regret it." Jordan tipped her chin up to look at her, though he could barely make out her features in the darkness. "Neither can I, and that terrifies me." She nestled closer. "What happens now?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Jordan's marriage, though hollow, was still legally binding. Emerson's position in his household made any relationship between them complicated at best, scandalous at worst. "I don't know," he admitted, honesty replacing the platitudes he might once have offered. "All I know is that tonight was the first time in years I felt truly alive." Emerson was quiet for a long moment. "We should be practical," she finally said, though her arms tightened around him. "This was a beautiful mistake. Tomorrow we return to our proper places." Jordan felt a protest rise in his throat, but swallowed it. She was right, of course. One night of passion couldn't erase the reality of their situations. Yet something fundamental had shifted inside him. The emptiness that had been his constant companion for years had been filled, if only temporarily, with warmth and genuine connection. "Tomorrow is tomorrow," he said instead, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Tonight is ours." As if granting them a reprieve, the power remained out all night. In the darkness they talked as lovers do, sharing stories, dreams and fears that had remained unvoiced for too long. Jordan learned about Emerson's passion for painting, how she'd put her art career on hold to care for her ailing grandmother, taking the household manager position to pay medical bills. Emerson discovered Jordan's lonely childhood as the son of a stern business mogul, his genuine desire for children stemming from a wish to create the loving family he'd never had. Between conversations, they made love again, slower this time, with the unhurried exploration of newfound territory. Each touch was a promise neither should make, each kiss a secret both would have to keep. Dawn found them still wrapped in each other's arms, the first pale light of morning stealing through the curtains. The storm had passed, leaving behind a fresh-washed world, and two people forever changed by a night that began with a simple wrong turn in a darkened hallway. "The power's back," Emerson noted, as the bedside lamp suddenly glowed to life. In the gentle light, Jordan looked at her properly for the first time since entering her room. Her curls tousled from his fingers, her lips slightly swollen from his kisses, her dark eyes holding a mixture of contentment and apprehension. "You're beautiful," he said simply. A blush darkened her cheeks. "You should go before the household wakes up." Reality intruded with her practical words. Jordan nodded, reluctantly separating himself from her warmth. He dressed quietly, each button of his shirt a step back toward the life waiting outside this. A room. At the door, he turned back. "Emerson, She pressed her fingers gently against his lips. "Don't make promises in the morning that the night can't keep," she whispered. "Whatever this was, it was beautiful. Let's not tarnish it with regrets or impossible expectations." Jordan caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Not all expectations are impossible," he said softly, then slipped from the room before either could say more. As he walked down the hallway to his actual room, Jordan felt like a different man than the one who had stumbled through the darkness hours before. Something had awakened in him, something he'd thought long dead. Whether it would blossom or wither remained to be seen, but one thing was certain: the compass of his life had found a new true north, and her name was Emerson. Chapter 3. Stolen Moments. Morning light streamed through the conservatory windows, bathing the room in golden warmth. Jordan sat at the breakfast table, newspaper open before him, though his eyes weren't focused on the financial section. Instead, they kept drifting to Emerson as she arranged fresh flowers in a vase near the window, her movements graceful and measured. 2 weeks had passed since that stormy night, 2 weeks of careful distance maintained in public, of professional exchanges with nothing to betray the earthquake that had shaken their worlds. 2 weeks of Jordan finding reasons to be home during the day, of Emerson lingering in rooms longer than necessary, of electricity crackling between them whenever they occupied the same space. "Will you be needing anything else, Mr. Castriel?" Emerson asked, her voice perfectly professional. Jordan looked up from his untouched breakfast. Vivian had already left for her charity board meeting, leaving them alone in the vast house. "Actually," he said, setting down his coffee cup, "I was hoping you might show me those sketches you mentioned for the garden renovation." It was their code, established after days of cautious circles around each other, a way to create moments of privacy without arousing suspicion. Emerson's lips curved in a subtle smile. "Of course. They're in the library. Whenever you're ready." Jordan watched her leave, waiting several minutes before following. Their discretion was born not just of his marital status, but of mutual respect for each other's dignity. What existed between them deserved better than furtive groping in closets or hasty encounters on kitchen counters. It deserved time, attention, care. The library door was slightly ajar when he arrived. Jordan slipped inside, locking it behind him. Emerson stood by the tall windows, sunlight highlighting the rich brown of her skin, making her seem to glow from within. "I missed you," he said simply, closing the distance between them. Her smile as she turned to him was worth every second of restraint they'd exercised. "It's only been since yesterday afternoon." "Too long," Jordan murmured, gathering her into his arms. The first kiss was always like coming home, a recognition, a relief, a renewal. They moved to the leather sofa tucked into an alcove between bookshelves. Here, in their borrowed sanctuary, they could almost pretend the outside world didn't exist. "I've been thinking," Emerson said, as she nestled against his chest, his arm wrapped around her shoulders. "This can't go on forever, Jordan." He tightened his hold instinctively. "Why not?" She gave him a look that was both tender and exasperated. "Because you're married. Because I work for you. Because we're living in a fantasy that has no future." "It doesn't feel like fantasy when I'm with you," Jordan said, tracing the curve of her cheek with his fingertips. "It feels like the only real thing in my life." Emerson captured his hand, pressing a kiss to his palm. "That's precisely why it's dangerous. We're creating something beautiful in an impossible situation." Jordan sighed, resting his forehead against hers. "My marriage was over long before I met you, Emerson. It's just taken me time to accept it. And now I know what it feels like to be truly seen by someone, to be valued for who I am, not what I can provide." He brushed his lips against hers. "I can't go back to the emptiness." Emerson's eyes searched his. "I'm not asking you to. But we need clarity, Jordan, for both our sakes." Before he could respond, she rose and crossed to a side table, returning with a sketchbook. "Since we're supposedly discussing garden designs, you should at least see my actual ideas." The change of subject was deliberate, Jordan knew. Emerson rarely pushed him about his marriage, understanding the complexity of his situation even as she maintained her own boundaries. She opened the book to reveal not garden sketches, but stunning artwork. Portraits, landscapes, abstract pieces, all rendered with remarkable skill. "Emerson," Jordan breathed, carefully turning pages. "These are extraordinary. Why haven't you shown me before?" She shrugged, a hint of vulnerability in the gesture. "It's just a hobby now, something I do in my free time." "This is far more than a hobby. You have genuine talent." He paused at a particularly striking portrait of an elderly woman with Emerson's same warm eyes. "Your grandmother?" Emerson nodded, touching the page gently. "Before the dementia took her from me. She raised me after my mother died." Jordan studied the love evident in every brushstroke. "You told me she needed care, but not that she'd passed." 3 months before I came to work here," Emerson said softly. "The medical bills. Well, that's why I stayed in this position even after she was gone. Dreams of art school had to wait." Jordan took her hand, struck by her quiet strength. "Show me more, please." For the next hour, they sat close together as Emerson shared her artwork and the stories behind each piece. Jordan listened, asked questions, and fell even deeper into admiration for the woman who had somehow found her way into his heart. "This one's new," he noted, pointing to a sketch of hands intertwined. One larger, one smaller, both rendered with intimate detail. Emerson blushed. "I drew it last week. After I held your hand while we watched the sunset from the terrace." Jordan finished, remembering the moment perfectly. They'd stood side by side, maintaining a proper distance, only their hands hidden behind a column betraying their connection. "You notice everything, don't you?" she said with a soft smile. "About you?" "Yes." Jordan closed the sketchbook and set it aside. "Which is why I know something's bothering you today, beyond the usual complications of our situation." Emerson hesitated, then sighed. "Mrs. Castriel has asked me to help plan a dinner party for next weekend, for her fertility specialist friends from Switzerland." The words landed like a stone in still water, ripples of tension spreading outward. Jordan's jaw tightened. "She's still pushing forward with that, despite my objections." "It's not my place," Emerson began. "It is," Jordan interrupted gently. "Whatever is between us, your thoughts matter to me." She met his eyes directly. "Then honestly? It seems like she's made up her mind that you're the problem, when medical science hasn't determined that at all. It feels controlling." Jordan nodded slowly. "It is. It always has been. But I didn't see it clearly until recently." He took her hand. "Until you showed me what respect actually feels like." Their lips met in a kiss that began tender but quickly deepened, weeks of restrained passion finding release. Jordan pulled her onto his lap, her thighs straddling his as his hands roamed her back, her waist, her hips. Emerson tangled her fingers in his hair, a soft moan escaping her as his mouth left hers to trace the column of her throat. "We shouldn't," she whispered, even as she pressed closer. "Not here." "Then where?" Jordan murmured against her skin. "Name the place, and I'll take you there." Their eyes met, desire and deeper emotions swirling between them. Without words, they both knew they had crossed a line from which there was no returning. What had begun as physical comfort in darkness had blossomed into something neither had anticipated. "The guest house," Emerson finally said. "This afternoon. Vivienne won't be back until evening, and I need to check on the plumbing repairs anyway." Jordan nodded, pressing his forehead to hers. "I'll meet you there at 3. The guest house stood at the far end of the property, hidden from the main house by a grove of mature oak trees. It was rarely used except for occasional overflow when the Castriels entertained large groups. Today, it would become their sanctuary. Jordan arrived first, his heart racing with anticipation. He'd brought wine, flowers, and had even managed to have lunch delivered from Emerson's favorite cafe. Setting everything out on the small dining table, he wondered when he'd last put such thought into pleasing someone else. The door opened softly, and there she was, Emerson in a simple sundress that made her look like summer personified. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, natural curls catching the light filtering through the windows. "You've been busy," she said, taking in his preparations with surprised pleasure. Jordan crossed to her, taking both her hands in his. "You deserve to be cherished." Those simple words shifted something in the atmosphere. Emerson's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. "Jordan." He kissed her then, pouring every unspoken emotion into the connection. They moved as one toward the bedroom, clothes falling away like the last barriers between them. In the filtered afternoon light, their lovemaking was unhurried and profound. Jordan worshipped every inch of her body, drawing sounds of pleasure. He treasured like rare gifts. Emerson matched his passion with her own, her touch both healing and igniting something deep within him. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever known," Jordan whispered as she moved above him, her body taking him deeper. Inside and out, Emerson leaned down to kiss him, her curls creating a curtain around them. "And you're the man I never allowed myself to dream of." They crested together, clinging to each other as waves of pleasure washed over them. In the quiet aftermath, they lay tangled in each other's arms, the world outside temporarily forgotten. I should paint this," Emerson said later, as they watched the play of light and shadow on the ceiling, this exact moment of perfect contentment. Jordan smiled, stroking her bare shoulder. "Would you? Paint us, I mean?" "Perhaps." She propped herself on one elbow to look at him. "But not like this. Not explicitly. Something that captures the essence without being obvious." The essence being. Her expression grew thoughtful. Two souls recognizing each other across an impossible divide. Finding connection despite everything. Jordan touched her face gently. "That's exactly what this is, isn't it? Recognition." Emerson nodded, leaning into his touch. "It terrifies me sometimes, how well you understand me after such a short time." "Not short," Jordan corrected. 3 years of watching you from a distance. 3 years of admiring your competence, your kindness, your quiet dignity. I just never allowed myself to acknowledge how deeply you'd affected me. And now? She asked, vulnerability clear in her voice. Now I can't imagine my life without you in it. The admission came easily, truth replacing the careful calculations that had governed his life for too long. I don't want to. Emerson kissed him softly. Then we'll find a way forward, together. They made love again as the afternoon waned, slower this time, each touch a promise neither spoke aloud. Afterward, they shared the meal Jordan had prepared, sitting wrapped in bedsheets, laughing and talking with the ease of long-time lovers. I should go back, Emerson said eventually, glancing at the clock. Vivian will return soon, and questions will be asked if neither of us is there. Jordan nodded, though reluctance showed in every line of his body. You go first. I'll follow in half an hour. As Emerson dressed, Jordan watched from the bed, memorizing every detail of this stolen afternoon. When can I see you again? Like this, I mean? She paused in buttoning her dress, considering. The Millers invited Vivian to their lake house this weekend. If she goes, she will, Jordan said. She never misses a chance to network with their circle. A slow smile spread across his face. A whole weekend? Emerson returned his smile, hope and anticipation lighting her features. A whole weekend. Neither spoke the deeper questions that lingered beneath their plans. Neither mentioned the inevitable reckoning that would come when fantasy collided with reality. For now, it was enough to have found each other, to have created something genuine. In the midst of pretense, Jordan pulled her down for one last kiss before she left. Until the weekend. Until then, Emerson replied, her eyes holding promises that sustained him long after she'd gone. Watching her walk back toward the main house, Jordan made a decision. Whatever happened next, he would no longer live a life of quiet desperation. He had glimpsed what real connection felt like, what it meant to be truly seen and accepted. And having found it, he wouldn't let it go. Chapter 4. Heartbeat Revelation. The garden gazebo stood like an island in a sea of late summer. Blooms, its white lattice structure covered in climbing roses. Inside, Jordan waited, watching raindrops create ripples in the koi pond beyond. The unexpected afternoon shower had driven most of the household staff indoors, providing the perfect cover for this meeting. 2 months had passed since that first stormy night, 2 months of stolen moments, secret weekends, and a deepening connection that both terrified and exhilarated them. 2 months of Jordan feeling increasingly like an imposter in his own marriage, while discovering his true self in Emerson's arms. He heard her footsteps on the gravel path and looked up, his expression brightening as it always did at the sight of her. Today she wore a simple blue dress that complemented her dark skin, her curls tamed into a neat bun at the nape of her neck. Even in this practical, professional attire, she captivated him completely. "Sorry I'm late," Emerson said as she entered the gazebo, slightly breathless. Mrs. Castriel had last-minute requests before her spa appointment. Jordan reached for her hands, drawing her close. "She's gone for the afternoon, then?" "Until at least 7, Emerson confirmed, though she gently stepped back from his embrace. "Jordan, we need to talk." Something in her tone made his stomach tighten. "What is it? Has something happened?" Emerson moved to the gazebo railing, watching the rain-drenched garden. "I've been trying to find the right way to tell you this for days," she said, her voice barely audible above the gentle patter of rain. Jordan joined her at the railing, maintaining a respectful distance, sensing her need for space. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." She turned to him then, her eyes holding a mixture of fear and something else, something that looked almost like wonder. "I'm pregnant, Jordan." The world seemed to still around him. Rain continued to fall, birds continued to sing. But in Jordan's consciousness, everything narrowed to those 3 words, and the woman who had spoken them. Pregnant, he repeated, feeling the weight of the word in his mouth. Emerson nodded, her hands moving instinctively to her still flat stomach. Almost 7 weeks. I confirmed it with a doctor yesterday. Jordan's mind raced through calculations, memories, possibilities. The weekend at the guest house? Most likely, she said, a small smile playing at her lips despite the gravity of their situation. We were rather careless. The memory of that perfect weekend, 3 days of uninterrupted bliss, of passion and tenderness, washed over Jordan. From that beautiful connection, new life had formed. A baby, he whispered, awe-replacing shock. Our baby. Emerson's eyes filled with tears. I don't expect anything from you, Jordan. I wanted you to know, but I understand the impossibility. Her. Words were cut off as Jordan closed the distance between them, falling to his knees before her. With reverent gentleness, he placed his hands on her abdomen, then pressed his forehead against the fabric covering the place where their child grew. Jordan? Emerson's voice trembled with uncertainty. He looked up at her, his own eyes glistening. Do you have any idea what a miracle this is? His voice broke with emotion. What you've given me. Emerson's composure crumbled as Jordan rose to his feet and gathered her in his arms. For several moments they simply held each other, overcome by the magnitude of what was happening. I was so afraid to tell you, she finally admitted, her voice muffled against his chest. Afraid you'd think I planned this, or that you'd see it as just another complication. Jordan drew back just enough to look into her eyes. This child is a gift, Emerson, the most precious gift anyone has ever given me. He kissed her then, pouring all his emotion into the connection. Gratitude, joy, love so intense it bordered on worship. When they finally parted, both breathless, he kept her close. But what do we do now? Emerson asked, practical concerns reasserting themselves. Your marriage, my position, the scandal if people find out. None of that matters, Jordan said firmly. All that matters is you and our child. Thunder rumbled in the distance as the gentle rain intensified. Jordan led Emerson to the cushioned bench at the center of the gazebo, sitting beside her with their hands entwined. I've been trying to find the courage to end my marriage for weeks, he admitted. Not just because of us, but because it's been over for years. We've both been living a lie, staying together for appearances, while growing further apart. Emerson squeezed his hand. Jordan, a baby changes everything. If Vivian finds out, when? Jordan corrected gently. Not if. I won't. Hide my child, Emerson. I won't pretend this miracle doesn't exist to protect a marriage that died long ago. She'll destroy you, Emerson warned, concern etching her features. Your reputation, your company, let her try. Jordan's voice held steel beneath the velvet. I built Castriel Enterprises from nothing after my father cut me off. I can do it again, if necessary. He brought her hand to his lips. Some things are worth any sacrifice. Emerson studied his face, searching for any hint of doubt. You really mean that, don't you? With every fiber of my being. Jordan placed his palm against her stomach again, his touch gentle. I've spent 10 years trying to give Vivienne the child she claimed would complete her life, only to realize she wanted an heir, not a child to love. And now, with you, with someone who sees me for who I am, this miracle happens. It doesn't seem real, Emerson admitted, looking down at their joined hands. When the test showed positive, I thought there must be some mistake. She hesitated, biting her lip before continuing. The doctor mentioned something else, actually. She said there was, well, an unusual reading. She wants me to come back next week for another ultrasound. Jordan's brow furrowed with concern. Is everything all right? She thinks so, Emerson assured him. She mentioned something about a strong family history on my mother's side. My grandmother was a twin, actually. But it's too early to tell anything for certain. Whatever happens, whatever comes, Jordan said, squeezing her hands, we'll face it together. He cupped her face in his hands. I love you, Emerson Rhodes. I've never said those words to you before, not because they weren't true, but because I wanted to be free to say them without reservation. But I can't wait anymore. I love you, and I will love our child with everything I am. Tears spilled from Emerson's eyes onto his hands. I love you too, Jordan. So much it terrifies me sometimes. Their lips met in a kiss that sealed their declarations, tender yet passionate, a promise of the future they would build together. Outside, the rain began to ease, sunlight breaking through clouds to cast dappled patterns through the gazebo's lattice roof. Look, Jordan whispered, nodding toward the garden where a perfect rainbow arched across the sky. Even nature is celebrating. With us? Emerson smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. My grandmother would call that a blessing sign. She was very spiritual that way. She would have been overjoyed to be a great-grandmother, Jordan said softly. Yes, Emerson agreed, her smile tinged with sadness. She would have spoiled this little one rotten. Jordan wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Then we'll have to spoil them enough for her, too. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the rainbow fade as the sun emerged fully. The peaceful moment felt like a fragile treasure, especially given the storms that surely lay ahead. I'll speak with Vivienne this weekend, Jordan finally said. She's planning a trip to Paris with her friends. Better to have that conversation before she leaves than let this hang over us any longer. Concern flickered across Emerson's face. Do you want me to be elsewhere when you tell her? Jordan considered this, then nodded reluctantly. It might be safer. She has a vindictive streak that's been getting worse lately. I could visit my cousin in the city, Emerson suggested. Just for the weekend. I'll miss you, Jordan said, drawing her closer. But yes, that's probably wisest. He pressed a kiss to her temple. When you return, we'll begin our new life. Together. The enormity of what lay ahead should have been daunting, but Jordan felt only certainty and a profound sense of rightness. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, his path was clear, illuminated by love rather than obligation or expectation. Our baby, he murmured again, the wonder of it still washing over him in waves. He placed his hand over Emerson's on her stomach. I can hardly believe it. Emerson's smile was radiant. Believe it. In about 7 months, you'll be holding your child in your arms. As they walked back toward the house, hand in hand through the rain-freshened garden, Jordan felt as though he were moving toward his true destiny. The rain had washed the world clean, and now, like the emerging sun, he and Emerson would begin to build something beautiful together, something built on truth, respect, and love. A family, his family. After years of emptiness, the word filled Jordan's heart like a prayer finally answered. 3 weeks had passed since Jordan and Emerson's conversation in the gazebo. 3 weeks of careful planning, stolen glances, and heightened anticipation of the future they'd soon begin together. The pregnancy was still their precious secret, though Emerson had started experiencing mild morning sickness that required increasingly creative explanations to the household staff. Jordan stood in his study, watching the evening sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn. Tonight was the night. Vivienne would return from her charity luncheon soon, and he'd finally have the conversation he'd been rehearsing in his mind for days. Emerson had left that morning for her cousin Mara's apartment in the city, her overnight bag packed with essentials for the weekend. Will you be needing anything else before I leave, Mr. Castriel? Harrison, the head of security, stood in the doorway. Jordan turned from the window. No, Harrison, thank you. Enjoy your evening off. The older man hesitated. "Sir, if I may, Mrs. Castriel has been acting strangely this past week. The staff has noticed." This caught Jordan's attention. Strangely how? Phone calls behind closed doors, meetings with people she's never brought to the house before. Harrison's weathered face showed genuine concern. "And she's been asking questions about Ms. Rhodes. Specific questions about her schedule, her friends, her medical appointments." A chill ran down Jordan's spine. Medical appointments. Harrison nodded gravely. "Peters drove her to a women's clinic last week. Mrs. Castriel asked him about it directly. He told her it wasn't his place to discuss staff whereabouts, but Vivienne can be persuasive," Jordan finished, a knot forming in his stomach. "Thank you for telling me, Harrison. Please ask Peters to report to me directly if Mrs. Castriel questions him again." After Harrison departed, Jordan paced the study, unease growing with each passing minute. Could Vivienne know? Had she somehow discovered their secret? The timing of his planned confrontation suddenly felt ominous. The sound of the front door opening and closing echoed through the house. Footsteps approached. Not Vivienne's usual confident stride, but something more deliberate, almost predatory. She appeared in the doorway of his study, impeccably dressed in a cream Chanel suit, diamond earrings catching the evening light. But her perfect appearance contrasted sharply with the cold calculation in her eyes. "Jordan," she said, her voice deceptively pleasant, "how thoughtful of you to wait up for me." "We need to talk, Vivienne," he replied, steeling himself for the confrontation ahead. "Yes, we certainly do." She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her with an ominous click. "But first, I have something to show you." From her designer handbag, she withdrew an envelope and tossed it onto the desk between them. Jordan stared at it, reluctant to pick it up. "Open it," Vivienne instructed, her smile not reaching her eyes. "I insist." With growing dread, Jordan reached for the envelope and pulled out its contents. Photographs. Clear, professional surveillance photographs of Emerson entering a medical clinic. Of Jordan and Emerson in the garden gazebo, his hands on her stomach in a gesture that couldn't be misinterpreted. Of them kissing in the guest house, clearly taken with a telephoto lens through the windows. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" Vivienne's voice had dropped its pleasant facade, revealing the steel beneath. 10 years of marriage, and you thought I wouldn't see the changes in you? The way you suddenly stopped pushing for fertility treatments? The way you came home with a smile after a decade of indifference? Jordan set the photos down, his mind racing. "How long have you known?" "Suspected. For weeks. Confirmed. Since I hired the investigator 3 days ago." Vivienne's perfect features twisted with disgust. "My husband and the maid. How utterly cliché." "Household manager," Jordan corrected automatically, anger beginning to replace shock. "And this marriage has been over for years, Vivienne. We both know that." "Over?" She laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. "A marriage is over when I say it's over, Jordan, not when you decide to stick your dick somewhere more convenient." Jordan flinched at the crudeness, so unlike Vivienne's usual calculated speech. "I'm not going to engage in vulgar accusations. I plan to speak with you tonight anyway. I want a divorce." Something dangerous flashed in Vivienne's eyes. "Because she's pregnant, isn't she? Your little ebony slut is carrying your child." The slur hit Jordan like a physical blow. In 10 years, he'd never heard Vivienne use such language, despite her many other flaws. "Don't you dare speak about her that way," he warned, his voice low. "I'll speak about her any way I please," Vivienne snapped, her composure fracturing. "She's nothing, nothing! Some service worker who spread her legs for her wealthy employer and hit the jackpot." "You know nothing about her," Jordan said, struggling to control his mounting anger. "Nothing about us." "Oh, I know enough," Vivienne countered, beginning to pace like a caged predator. "I know she's 10 weeks pregnant with what should have been my child. I know you've been sneaking around for months while I've been fighting to save our marriage. I know her pathetic little art hobby has been financed with my household budget." Jordan watched her warily, disturbed by the escalating hostility. This wasn't just Vivian's usual cold anger. This was something more volatile, more dangerous. "Vivian, let's discuss this rationally," he attempted. "Our marriage hasn't been functioning for years. We both deserve a chance at happiness." "Happiness?" She spat the word like poison. "You think you deserve happiness after this betrayal? After humiliating me in front of our entire social circle? Do you have any idea what people will say when they find out you impregnated the help?" Jordan took a deep breath, centering himself. "I don't care what people say. For the first time in years, I've found someone who sees me, the real me. Not my name, not my money, just me." "How romantic," Vivian sneered. "And what exactly did I do? You think she sees in you, Jordan? A meal ticket, a green card, a wealthy father for her bastard? Enough." Jordan rarely raised his voice, but her relentless attacks on Emerson's character pushed him past restraint. "You don't get to stand there in clothes that cost more than most people's monthly salary and demean a woman who has more integrity in her little finger than you've shown in a decade." Vivian's eyes widened at his outburst, then narrowed dangerously. Without another word, she turned and stalked from the room. Jordan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. The confrontation had gone even worse than he'd anticipated. He reached for his phone to text Emerson, to warn her, to make sure she was safe, when the sound of breaking glass echoed from elsewhere in the mansion. Jordan rushed from the study, following the noise to the entrance hall. What he saw there made his blood run cold. Vivian stood amid a growing circle of shocked staff members. Emerson's paintings scattered around her feet. Some had been slashed, others smashed from their frames. In her hand, Vivian held a crystal paperweight from his office, poised to destroy another canvas. "Where is she hiding?" Vivian demanded, her voice eerily calm despite the destruction surrounding her. "Where is the whore who seduced my husband?" Mrs. Castriel, the housekeeper, stepped forward tentatively. "Ms. Rhodes is away for the weekend visiting family. Please, let's discuss this privately." "Privately?" Vivian laughed, the sound bordering on maniacal. "Why would I want privacy when my husband has been fucking the maid behind my back? Let everyone know. Let the whole world know what kind of man Jordan Castriel really is." Jordan moved forward, his voice low but commanding. "Vivian, that's enough. This isn't the way to handle this." Her eyes blazed with hatred when she saw him. "Oh, look, everyone. The great Jordan Castriel, who couldn't get his own wife pregnant for 10 years, but apparently had no trouble knocking up the help." The words hit Jordan like physical blows. The staff stood frozen, expressions ranging from shock to embarrassment, to, from those who knew Emerson well, poorly concealed anger on her behalf. "Everyone except security, please leave," Jordan said quietly. The staff dispersed quickly, though he knew the damage was done. By nightfall, every household employee would know what had transpired. When only he and Vivian remained in the entrance hall, Jordan faced his wife directly. "You've made your point, Vivian. Now stop this destructive behavior. It's beneath." Beneath me?" she snarled, gesturing to the ruined artwork. "What's beneath me is having my husband impregnate our maid in our home. Did you fuck her in our bed, Jordan, while I was at my charity functions working to maintain our social standing?" "I never once disrespected you that way," Jordan said, firmly. "Neither did Emerson. Whatever you think of our relationship, it wasn't about disrespecting you." "Oh, how considerate." Vivian's voice dripped sarcasm. "You kept your affair in the guest wing. Should I be grateful?" She picked up a partially intact canvas, a beautiful landscape Emerson had painted of the garden gazebo at sunset. With deliberate malice, Vivian raked her manicured nails across the painting, shredding it beyond repair. I built you, she hissed, advancing toward Jordan. When your father cut you off, who introduced you to the investors that funded your first venture? When you needed connections, who opened doors for you? I made you, Jordan Castriel, and I can unmake you just as easily. Our marriage was a partnership, Jordan acknowledged, maintaining his composure, until it became a prison for both of us. A prison? Vivian laughed incredulously. You call this a prison? She gestured around the opulent entrance hall. Most people would kill for what you have. What I have, Jordan echoed quietly. A beautiful house filled with expensive things and devoid of love. A marriage that exists only on paper. A wife who measures my worth by my ability to provide an heir. Something in his calm assessment seemed to enrage Vivienne further. She swept her arm across a side table, sending an antique vase crashing to the marble floor. You ungrateful bastard, she spat. You think your little colored girlfriend will make you happy? You think her bastard child will give your life meaning? You're nothing without me, Jordan. Nothing! The naked hatred in her voice shocked even Jordan, who thought he'd seen every side of Vivian over their decade together. This wasn't just anger or wounded pride. This was something darker, more primitive. This conversation is over, he said, firmly. You need time to calm down. I'll stay at the hotel tonight. Tomorrow we can discuss divorce arrangements civilly with our attorneys present. Divorce? Vivian's laugh held an edge of hysteria. You think I'll make this easy for you? You think I'll just walk away while you play house with your pregnant slut? She picked up another painting. I will destroy you, Jordan. Your reputation, your company, your precious new family. By the time I'm finished, you'll be begging me to take you back. With that, she struck a decorative candle, knocking it onto the painting in her hands. The canvas caught immediately, flames licking at the edges of the frame. Vivian, no! Jordan lunged forward as security rushed in, someone grabbing a fire extinguisher from the wall. In the chaos, Vivian slipped away, the sound of her car engine roaring to life moments later. By the time the small fire was contained, she was gone, leaving behind destroyed art and the smoldering remains of Jordan's former life. Harrison surveyed the damage grimly. I'm sorry, sir. I should have anticipated this. No one could have predicted this level of vindictiveness, Jordan assured him, though his heart ached at the sight of Emerson's ruined artwork, pieces she'd created with such care and passion. Have someone pack up what can be salvaged and store it safely. And Ms. Rhodes, sir, should I arrange security for her? Jordan nodded, already pulling out his phone. Yes, immediately, and contact my attorney. This just became much more complicated. As he surveyed the destruction around him, Jordan knew their paradise of secret love had been irretrievably lost. Whatever came next would happen in the harsh light of public scrutiny, with Vivian determined to punish them both for daring to find happiness together. His phone buzzed with a text from Emerson. Just arrived at Mara's. Missing you already. How did it go with Vivian? Jordan stared at the simple message, imagining her waiting for his reply, unaware that their world had just imploded. With trembling fingers he typed, Vivian knows everything. She didn't take it well. Stay where you are. I'll come to you tonight. We'll face whatever comes together, I promise. He only hoped it was a promise he could keep. Chapter 6. Empty kingdom rain streamed down the windows of Jordan's downtown penthouse office, the gloomy weather matching his mood. 3 weeks had passed since Vivian's explosive revelation. 3 weeks of tabloid headlines, whispered conversations that stopped when he entered rooms, and pointed silence from business associates who had once been eager for his attention. The board meeting is set for Thursday, Richard, his chief legal counsel, reported from the leather chair opposite Jordan's desk. Fuller's faction is pushing for a vote of no confidence. Jordan nodded, unsurprised. Thomas Fuller had been his father-in-law's closest ally on the Castriel Enterprises board, and his loyalty remained with Vivian. How many votes can they muster? Richard grimaced. It's tight. The publicity has been damaging. The family man betrays socialite wife for pregnant household employee angle plays well in certain circles. And the fact that the socialite wife tried to burn down our house and has been spreading vicious racial slurs about Emerson doesn't seem to make the headlines, Jordan observed bitterly. It's an ugly situation all around, Richard agreed, his weathered face sympathetic. At 65, he'd seen enough corporate and personal scandals to remain unshockable. The restraining order against Vivian is holding, at least. No more unexpected visits or threats. Small mercies, Jordan thought. After the destruction of Emerson's artwork, Vivian had escalated, showing up at Mara's apartment building to scream obscenities, sending threatening messages, even attempting to contact Emerson's former doctor to access her medical records. The restraining order had become necessary for everyone's safety. What about the divorce filing? Jordan asked, loosening his tie as he swiveled his chair to face the rain-lashed windows. She's contesting everything, as expected, demanding the full penalties outlined in the prenuptial agreement for infidelity. Richard flipped through his notes. Her team is pushing for expedited proceedings, which actually works in our favor given her current behavior. Jordan rubbed his forehead, fatigue settling deep in his bones. And Emerson? Any progress on the harassment charges against Maxwell? Richard's expression darkened. That's more complicated. As Vivian's personal attorney, Maxwell can claim he was acting on his client's behalf when he approached Emerson's landlord with those allegations. Jordan's jaw tightened at the memory of Emerson's tearful call last week. Maxwell had visited her apartment building's owner, insinuating she was running a prostitution service and threatening an investigation that would implicate the entire building. The terrified landlord had given Emerson 3 days to vacate. That's why she's staying with you now? Richard asked carefully. Not exactly. Jordan sighed, revealing the complexity that had developed between them. She was at first. After the landlord incident, she had nowhere else to go, but after a few days, he trailed off, remembering their conversation. Emerson said she needed space to process everything. That moving directly from my household staff to my live-in girlfriend made her feel like she was trading one form of dependence for another. She's staying at Mara's studio apartment above the gallery now. Richard nodded thoughtfully. She sounds like a woman with a strong sense of self. She is, Jordan agreed, a small smile softening his features despite everything. It's one of the things I love most about her. She refuses to be defined by circumstances or relationships. Even with everything happening, she's enrolled in art classes, started selling her work at Mara's gallery. And the pregnancy? Richard asked delicately. Almost 12 weeks now, Jordan replied, his expression warming further. The morning sickness is finally easing. She had another ultrasound yesterday. Everything looks perfect. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Castriel, his assistant's voice was unusually hesitant. Mrs. Castriel, that is your wife, is on line 1. She says it's urgent. Jordan frowned. Since the restraining order, all communication was supposed to go through their attorneys. Put her through, he decided, curiosity overcoming caution. Jordan, Vivian's voice was silk over steel. How considerate of you to take my call. What do you want, Vivian? Our attorneys agreed. Oh, spare me the legal posturing, she interrupted. I'm calling with a proposition. One that might interest you given your predicament. Jordan's wariness increased. I'm listening. I've had time to reflect on our situation, Vivian continued smoothly. And perhaps I overreacted. A bitter laugh escaped Jordan. Overreacted? You destroyed priceless artwork, tried to set our house on fire, and have been harassing an innocent woman for weeks. That's a bit beyond overreacting. Water under the bridge. Vivian dismissed. Here's my offer. I'll agree to a quick, quiet divorce. No contested assets, no messy court battles. You keep your precious company. I keep the houses and an appropriate settlement. Jordan's suspicion deepened. In exchange for what? Your little maid disappears, Vivian said flatly. No acknowledgement of the child as yours. You never see either of them again. I'll even throw in a generous relocation package for her somewhere very, very far away. White-hot anger surged through Jordan. Are you out of your mind? You think I'd abandon Emerson and my child? For what? To protect my reputation, my wealth? For freedom, Vivian countered. Think about it, Jordan. No social stigma, no racial complications. You'd be the wronged husband who magnanimously granted his wife a divorce, despite her mental breakdown. In time, you could remarry someone appropriate. Have legitimate children who won't face questions about their parentage or be tainted by scandal. Go to hell, Vivienne, Jordan said quietly, his voice deadly calm. There is nothing you could offer that would make me betray Emerson or my child. Not money, not reputation, nothing. Vivienne's laugh was cold. Such noble sentiments. Let's see how long they last when your board removes you, when your investors flee, when your business collapses around you. What will you offer your precious Emerson then? A life of struggle and shame? A life of love, Jordan replied simply. Something you wouldn't understand. Love, Vivienne scoffed. Don't be naive. She saw a wealthy man and seized her opportunity. The oldest trick in the book, getting pregnant by the boss. Jordan shook his head, pity replacing anger. You really can't conceive of genuine love, can you? Emerson didn't pursue me, Vivian. She tried to resist what was happening between us, because she respected my marriage more than you ever did. How touching, Vivian's voice dripped venom. Well, when your little domestic fantasy collapses under the weight of reality, don't come crawling back. My offer expires today. Then consider it permanently declined, Jordan said firmly. Goodbye, Vivienne. I truly hope you find happiness. Someday, though I doubt you'd recognize it if you did. He ended the call, his body tense with residual anger and disgust. The idea that he would abandon Emerson and their child for social convenience was so preposterous it bordered on insanity. Yet Vivian had proposed it as if it were a reasonable option, revealing just how fundamentally she had misunderstood him throughout their marriage. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows as Jordan packed his briefcase. He needed to be away from this office, from the corporate concerns that suddenly seemed so trivial compared to what truly mattered. Cancel my afternoon meetings, he instructed his assistant. I'm taking the rest of the day. The drive through rain-slicked streets to Mara's gallery took longer than usual, giving Jordan time to reflect on how dramatically his life had changed in just a few short weeks. His perfectly ordered existence had been upended, his reputation tarnished, his business threatened. Yet despite these objectively negative developments, he felt more alive, more authentic than he had in years. Mara's Fine Arts occupied a renovated brick warehouse in the city's emerging arts district. The gallery space occupied the ground floor, with Mara's apartment and a small studio apartment for Emerson above. When Jordan entered, shaking raindrops from his coat, the gallery was empty, save for Mara herself, arranging lighting for a new exhibition. The CEO graces us with his presence, she commented wryly, though her smile was genuine. Mara had initially been skeptical of Jordan's intentions toward her cousin, but his steadfast support through the recent chaos had earned her grudging respect. Is she here? Jordan asked, running a hand through his damp hair. Mara nodded toward the back stairs, in the studio, working on something new. She studied his face. Bad day. Vivian called, he admitted, made me an offer. Understanding dawned in Mara's expressive eyes. Let me guess, your company and reputation in exchange for dumping Emerson and the baby? Jordan nodded, not surprised that Mara had intuited Vivienne's strategy so precisely. And you're here, which means you told her where to stick her offer, Mara concluded with satisfaction. Good man. She waved him toward the stairs. Go on up. She could use a pleasant surprise. The morning sickness hit hard. Today, Jordan took the stairs 2 at a time, anticipation building with each step. Despite seeing Emerson almost daily, their current separation, necessary as it might be for her sense of independence, left him constantly yearning for her presence. He knocked softly on the studio door. After a moment, it opened to reveal Emerson. In paint-spattered overalls, her curls pulled back in a colorful scarf, smudges of blue on her cheek and hands. The sight of her, so natural, so herself, made Jordan's heart expand with love. Jordan! Her surprise gave way to delight as she pulled him inside. What are you doing here in the middle of the day? I needed to see you, he said simply, drinking in the sight of her. The pregnancy was just beginning to show, a slight roundness to her previously slender frame that filled him with wonder each time he noticed it. The small studio was transformed from the bare space it had been just weeks before. Canvases in various stages of completion lined the walls. Art supplies organized on shelves Jordan had helped install. A comfortable daybed occupied one corner. Beside it, a small refrigerator stocked with the ginger tea and crackers that helped with her morning sickness. You're working, Jordan observed, noting the large canvas on the easel, an abstract piece in blues and golds that somehow captured both storm and sunlight. I don't want to interrupt. You're never an interruption, Emerson countered, wiping her hands on a cloth before rising on tiptoes to kiss him. Your inspiration. The simple declaration warmed him to his core. He wrapped his arms around her, careful not to press too tightly against her midsection. How are you feeling today? Mara said the morning sickness was bad. Emerson grimaced. Whoever named it morning sickness had a cruel sense of humor. It's been all-day sickness. But it passed about an hour ago, and I've been painting ever since. She studied his face. What's wrong? Something's happened. Jordan smiled ruefully. Her ability to read him still amazed him sometimes. Vivienne called. Offered a deal. Emerson stiffened slightly in his arms. What kind of deal? Leading her to the daybed, Jordan recounted the conversation as they sat side by side. Emerson listened, without interrupting, though her expression darkened as he described Vivienne's proposal. She actually thought you'd agree to that? Emerson finally asked, incredulous. That you'd abandon your child? For business convenience? She doesn't understand what matters to me, Jordan said softly, taking Emerson's paint-stained hand in his. She never has. Emerson was quiet for a moment, absently tracing patterns on the back of his hand with her thumb. And your board meeting? Could you really lose the company? The concern in her voice touched him deeply. Despite her own precarious situation, pregnant, career disrupted, social standing challenged, she worried about him. It's possible, Jordan admitted. Fuller's faction is strong, and the scandal has shaken investor confidence. The Jensen merger is still proceeding, which helps, but, he shrugged, if it happens, it happens. I built Castriel Enterprises from nothing. I can build something new if necessary. But you've worked so hard, Emerson protested. 10 years of your life. 10 years of my life spent building a company while my soul withered in an empty marriage. Jordan interrupted gently. I'd trade it all in a heartbeat for what we're building now. This, you, our child, a life of genuine connection. This is what matters. Tears filled Emerson's eyes. I never meant to cost you everything, Jordan. You haven't cost me anything, he corrected. Firmly, you've given me everything that matters. A chance at real happiness. A family built on love rather than obligation. He placed his hand gently on her belly. Our child is worth more than every dollar in my bank accounts, every share of company stock, every material possession I've ever acquired. Emerson covered, his hand with hers, a single tear tracking down her cheek. I just wish it didn't have to be so hard. that we could have found each other in simpler circumstances. Life rarely offers perfect timing, Jordan said, brushing away her tear with his thumb, but it does offer perfect connections if we're brave enough to recognize them. He kissed her then, pouring all his certainty, all his commitment into the gesture. Emerson responded with equal fervor, her body melting against his as the rain continued to paint the windows with silver streaks. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Jordan rested his forehead against hers. "Move back in with me," he whispered. "Not because you need to, but because I need you. Because that apartment isn't home without you in it." Emerson drew back slightly, searching his face. "Jordan, I know you need your independence," he continued quickly. "I respect that, admire it even. But we're building a family together. Shouldn't we do that under the same roof?" "I don't want to be dependent on you," Emerson admitted, vulnerability clear in her voice. "I spent 3 years as your employee. I don't want to become my kept woman," Jordan finished when she hesitated. "Is that what you're afraid of?" She nodded, eyes downcast. "People already think I targeted you for your money. Moving into your luxury apartment while pregnant with your child, it would look exactly like what Vivian claims it is." Jordan considered her words carefully before responding. "What if we found a new place? Not my apartment, not your studio. Something that belongs to both of us, a fresh start." Surprise registered on Emerson's face. "You'd do that? Leave your penthouse?" "It's just a place, Emerson. 4 walls and a roof. Without you, it's just an empty kingdom." He squeezed her hand gently. "I want to build a home with you, wherever that may be." The love that bloomed across her features was answer enough, even before she spoke. "Yes," she whispered, "let's find our home, together." As Jordan held her close, the rain outside began to ease, patches of blue appearing between clouds. Like the weather, he felt the darkness of recent weeks beginning to lift. The road ahead might still have challenges, but with Emerson by his side, he knew they could weather any storm. The empty kingdom of his former life, the hollow luxury, the meaningless status symbols, the loveless marriage, all seemed like a distant memory now. In its place, he was building something infinitely more valuable. A life filled with genuine love, shared dreams, and the family he'd always yearned. And not all the wealth in the world could compare to that. Chapter 7. Soul's Reunion. "What do you think of this one?" Jordan asked, leading Emerson through the sunlit living room of the 4th property they'd viewed that day. The brick townhouse occupied a quiet corner in a tree-lined neighborhood, walking distance from both the business district and Mara's gallery. A month had passed since their decision to find a place together, a month of house hunting between board meetings and doctor appointments, of planning their future while navigating the present's complications. The divorce proceedings continued to drag on, with Vivian deploying every delaying tactic her legal team could devise. Emerson moved to the bay window, running her fingers along the built-in bookshelf beside it. "It has character," she observed, glancing up at the original crown molding, "and good bones, not the sterile luxury you're used to, though." Jordan came up behind her, slipping his arms around her waist to rest his hands on the gentle swell of her 4-month pregnant belly. "I told you I don't need luxury, I need you." She leaned back against him, their reflection captured in the window glass, him in his casual weekend clothes, so different from his corporate attire, her in a flowing dress that accommodated her changing body. They looked right together, like puzzle pieces finally finding their match. "There's a small room next to the master that would make a perfect nursery," the realtor commented from the doorway, her professional smile not quite hiding her fascination with the high-profile couple. Despite their attempts at privacy, their relationship had become fodder for society columns and business news alike. "And the 3rd bedroom could be your studio," Jordan murmured against Emerson's ear. "Northern exposure, just like you wanted." Emerson turned in his arms, studying his face. "You really like it, don't you?" "I love it," he confirmed. "But more importantly, what do you think? Is this home?" Her eyes traveled around the space once more, lingering on details. The window seat perfect for reading, the fireplace with its original tiles, the hardwood floors that would feel warm underfoot. Finally, she nodded, a smile spreading across her face. "Yes, this is where our family begins." Jordan's heart swelled at the simple declaration. He kissed her lightly, mindful of their audience, before turning to the realtor. "We'll take it." Later, celebratory takeout containers spread across their hotel suite's coffee table. They discussed plans for their new home. Jordan sat on the floor between Emerson's knees as she perched on the sofa, her fingers working magic on his tense shoulders. "The board voted today," he said quietly, closing his eyes as her thumbs found a particularly tight knot. Her hands paused momentarily. "And I survived by 2 votes." He tilted his head back to look at her. "The Jensen merger closed yesterday. Fuller's faction lost some momentum when the stock jumped 12% in response." Relief washed over Emerson's face. "Thank goodness. I know you said you could start over if necessary, but you were worried anyway," Jordan finished, reaching up to catch one of her hands and bring it to his lips. "I know. It would have been fine either way, but I'm glad we don't have to test that particular theory." Emerson resumed her massage, working on a stubborn knot at the base of his neck. "Any news from Richard about the divorce?" Jordan grimaced. "Vivian's team is now claiming I concealed assets. They're demanding a complete audit of Castriel Holdings and the family trust." "Can they do that?" "They can try." Jordan sighed as her fingers released another band of tension. "My mother has already authorized our legal team to provide documentation proving the structures were established years ago, long before our separation. It's just another delay tactic." Emerson was quiet for a moment, her hands moving methodically across his shoulders. "Do you ever regret it?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible. "Us, I mean. All this complication. The scandal." Jordan turned completely, rising to his knees to face her. "Never," he said firmly, taking both her hands in his. Not for a single second. He placed one hand on her rounded belly. "This child, this life we're building together, it's worth everything, Emerson, everything." The vulnerability in her eyes reminded him that beneath her strength she carried her own insecurities. The world had not been kind in its judgment in their relationship, casting her as the calculating seductress who'd ensnared a wealthy man. Though she rarely mentioned it, he knew the whispers and news stories affected her. "I have something for you," Jordan said, reaching into his pocket. "I was going to wait until we moved into the townhouse, but—" He withdrew a small velvet box. "Maybe now is better." Emerson's eyes widened as he opened the box to reveal a delicate ring, not a diamond, but a vintage sapphire surrounded by tiny pearls. "This was my grandmother's," he explained, watching her face carefully. "My mother gave it to me last week when I told her about the townhouse. It's not an engagement ring. I know we're not ready for that conversation yet, but it is a promise." He took the ring from its box. "A promise that you are not temporary in my life, that you and our child are my priority, my future, my heart's home." His voice softened further. "May I?" Wordlessly, Emerson extended her right hand. Jordan slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. "It's beautiful," she whispered, blinking back tears as she examined the delicate setting. "Jordan, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he assured her, lifting her hand to press a kiss to her palm. "Just know that whatever lies ahead, we face it together." Emerson slid from the sofa to kneel before him, their foreheads touching, in an intimate gesture that had become their own private ritual. Together, she echoed, sealing the promise with a kiss that quickly deepened from tender to passionate. They made love slowly that night, mindful of her changing body, each touch a reaffirmation of their connection. Afterward, Jordan held her, close, his hand splayed protectively over the swell of their child, marveling at how completely his life had transformed in less than a year. "Oh!" Emerson suddenly gasped, her hand flying to her belly. Jordan bolted upright, alarm shooting through him. "What's wrong? Are you in pain?" To his surprise, Emerson laughed, a sound of pure delight. "Not pain, movement." She grabbed his hand, repositioning it on a specific spot below her navel. "Wait, there. Did you feel that?" At first, Jordan felt nothing. Then, a flutter, the lightest of movements beneath his palm. Their child, making its presence known for the first time. "Oh my God," he breathed, awe overwhelming him. "That's our baby." "Active already," Emerson noted, her smile luminous in the dim light. "Just like his father." "Or her mother," Jordan countered, keeping his hand in place, hoping for another movement. Emerson bit her lip, a mischievous expression crossing her face. "Actually, the doctor could tell at yesterday's ultrasound. I was waiting for the right moment to tell you." Jordan's heart raced with anticipation. "And, boy or girl?" "Boy," Emerson said softly, covering his hand with hers. "We're having a son, Jordan. A son," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. The abstract concept of fatherhood suddenly became concrete. A little boy who would call him Dad, who might have his eyes or Emerson's smile, who would need guidance and love and protection. Tears filled his eyes, spilling unashamedly down his cheeks as he lowered his face to press a kiss against Emerson's bare belly. "Hello, little one," he whispered against her skin. "I can't wait to meet you." Emerson's fingers threaded through his hair, her own eyes wet with happy tears. "I've been thinking about names," she admitted. "Would you mind if we honored my grandmother? Somehow? Perhaps as a middle name?" "Anything you want," Jordan replied immediately. "What was his name?" "James," Emerson said. "James Rhodes. He raised me after my mother died, taught me everything about strength and dignity. He would have loved you, I think." Jordan smiled, deeply touched by her desire to connect their child to her family heritage. "James is perfect for a middle name. Any thoughts on the first?" They spent the next hour discussing possibilities, interrupted occasionally by another flutter of movement from their son. Outside, the city continued its nighttime rhythm, but within their suite, the world narrowed to just the three of them. Mother, father, and the child who had brought them together in the most unexpected way. The following week brought another milestone, the closing on their townhouse. Standing in the empty living room after signing the final papers, keys in hand, Jordan and Emerson surveyed what would soon become their home. "I can already see it," Emerson said, excitement brightening her features. "Bookshelves there, that reading nook by the window, a gallery wall of family photos up the staircase." Jordan watched her move through the space, her creative vision transforming the empty rooms into a home even as she spoke. Her energy and enthusiasm were contagious, washing away the residual stress of another contentious hearing in the divorce proceedings that morning. "When should we start moving our things?" she asked, turning to find him watching her with a tender expression. "Richard thinks we should wait until after next week's court date," Jordan replied reluctantly. "Vivian's team is looking for any excuse to claim I'm disposing of marital assets." Disappointment flickered across Emerson's face, though she quickly masked it. "Of course, that makes sense." Jordan crossed to her, drawing her into his arms. "It's just a small delay, another week or two at most. Then we're home free." "Home free," Emerson echoed, resting her head against his chest. "I like the sound of that." The drive back to the hotel was quiet, both lost in thoughts of the future. When Jordan's phone rang, he glanced at the display before answering on the car's Bluetooth system. "Richard, you're on speaker with Emerson and me." "Jordan, good. I've been trying to reach you. Richard's voice filled the car, tension evident in his tone. There's been a development. Vivian's team just filed an emergency motion seeking a court order for genetic testing of Emerson's pregnancy. The IC car swerved slightly as Jordan's hands jerked on the steering wheel. They what? They're alleging the child may not be yours, Richard continued grimly. That Emerson became pregnant deliberately to trap you, possibly with another man's child. That's outrageous, Jordan erupted, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Completely baseless. Emerson wasn't seeing anyone else, and Vivian knows. The timeline makes it impossible. I'll do it, Emerson interrupted quietly. Both men fell silent. I'll take the test, she clarified, her voice steady despite the pallor of her face. I have nothing to hide. This child is Jordan's, and I want that fact legally established beyond any doubt. Jordan glanced at her, concern etched in his features. Emerson, you don't have to submit to this. It's an obvious harassment tactic. No, she said firmly. I want to do this. For our son. For us. Her hand rested protectively over her belly. Let Vivian play her games. The truth is on our side. Her quiet dignity in the face of such an ugly accusation moved Jordan deeply. While he wanted to shield her from further humiliation, he recognized the strength in her decision. Richard, set it up, he instructed, reaching for Emerson's hand. The sooner this particular slander is disproven, the better. I'll arrange it for tomorrow morning, Richard promised. And Jordan, this desperation move suggests Vivian's running out of legal maneuvers. We may be closer to the end than it appears. After disconnecting the call, Jordan pulled the car into a scenic overlook, needing a moment before continuing to the hotel. Turning to Emerson, he took both her hands in his. I'm so sorry you have to endure this, he said, his voice rough with emotion. If I had known the price you'd pay for loving me, Emerson pressed her fingers gently to his lips, stopping his words. No regrets, remember? Not for a single second. Using his own words against him, drew a reluctant smile. You're remarkable, do you know that? Most women would have run for the hills months ago. I'm not most women, Emerson replied simply. And what we have is worth fighting for. She guided his hand to her belly, where their son chose that moment. To deliver a particularly energetic kick, Jordan laughed, despite the situation. The simple miracle of that movement putting everything in perspective. He agrees with you. Smart boy, Emerson teased, her smile returning. He gets that from me. The genetic testing proceeded as scheduled the following morning, a simple blood draw for Emerson and a cheek swab for Jordan. 3 days later, Richard. He called with the results, unsurprising but profoundly validating. 97% probability of paternity, he reported. The judge has already dismissed Vivian's motion and issued a strong rebuke to her legal team for what he termed harassment disguised as due diligence. The relief was palpable, not because either had doubted the outcome, but because one more weapon had been removed from Vivian's arsenal. That evening, they celebrated with a quiet dinner at the townhouse, picnicking on the floor of their still empty living room. To our home, Jordan toasted, raising his glass of sparkling cider to match Emerson's. To our family, she countered, the sapphire ring glinting on her finger as they clinked glasses. As the sunset painted the empty room in shades of gold and rose, Jordan watched Emerson describing her vision for the nursery, her face animated with joy and anticipation. Something shifted inside him, a certainty crystallizing into decision. Move in now, he said suddenly. Emerson paused mid-sentence. What? To hell with Vivian's legal maneuvers and Richard's caution? Jordan continued, taking her hands in his. This is our home, our son's home. I don't want to wait another day to start our life here. A slow smile spread across Emerson's face. Are you sure? What about the divorce proceedings? Let the lawyers handle it, Jordan said firmly. I'm done. Letting Vivian dictate how we live. We've been separated for months. The testing confirms the baby is mine. We own this house together, legally and properly. There's no valid reason to keep living in that hotel when our home is sitting empty." The joy that bloomed across Emerson's features was answer enough, even before she spoke. "Yes," she whispered. "Let's come home, Jordan. Today. Now." That night they slept on a mattress delivered hastily to the master bedroom, lacking bed frames or proper furnishings, wrapped in each other's arms. And despite the emptiness of the house around them, both felt the profound completeness of souls, finally, truly reunited in the place they were always meant to be. Chapter 8. Love's Testimony. The courtroom hushed as Emerson took the witness stand, her 6-month pregnant belly evident beneath the modest navy dress she wore. Jordan watched from his seat at the defense table, heart pounding with equal measures of love and concern. He hated that she had to endure this public scrutiny, but her testimony had become unavoidable after Vivian's latest legal maneuver. "Please state your name for the record," Judge Winters instructed, her tone neutral but her eyes kind as they rested briefly on Emerson's rounded stomach. "Emerson Jade Rhodes," she replied, her voice soft but steady. Maxwell Anderson, Vivian's attorney, approached with the predatory smile that had become all too familiar over the past weeks of divorce proceedings. "Ms. Rhodes, how would you describe your relationship with Mr. Castriel before it became intimate?" Richard Harrington, Jordan's attorney, rose immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel's tone implies impropriety in what was a professional relationship. I'm simply establishing background, Your Honor," Anderson countered smoothly. The judge nodded. "Overruled? But watch your tone, Mr. Anderson." Emerson met Anderson's gaze directly, refusing to be intimidated. "I was the household manager for the Castriel residence for 3 years. My duties included overseeing staff, coordinating schedules, and ensuring the household ran efficiently." "And at what point did you decide Mr. Castriel might be more valuable to you than just an employer?" Anderson asked, his implication clear. "Objection," Richard called, rising again. "Sustained," Judge Winters said firmly. "Mr. Anderson, I've warned you about your tone." Anderson inclined his head in false contrition. "Let me rephrase. Ms. Rhodes, when did your relationship with Mr. Castriel change from professional to personal?" "Approximately 8 months ago," Emerson answered calmly. "Neither of us planned it. We connected as people who respected and valued each other." Anderson's smile turned predatory. "And within weeks of this connection, you became pregnant. Quite fortunate timing, wouldn't you say?" Jordan tensed, fighting the urge to intervene. Richard objected again, but Emerson spoke before the judge could rule. "There was nothing fortunate about it," she said, a hint of steel entering her voice. "The pregnancy was unexpected for both of us. What was fortunate was discovering that Jordan wanted this child as much as I did." Her use of Jordan's first name, natural, unforced, spoke volumes about their genuine relationship. Several jurors exchanged glances, clearly moved by her sincerity. Anderson pressed on, his questions growing increasingly pointed as he tried to portray Emerson as calculating and opportunistic. For nearly an hour, she weathered his thinly veiled accusations with remarkable composure, neither growing defensive nor allowing him to provoke an emotional outburst. "Ms. Rhodes," Anderson finally said, his frustration barely concealed, "are you aware that under the terms of the Castriel's prenuptial agreement, Mr. Castriel stands to lose approximately half his fortune due to his infidelity?" "I am now. Yes," Emerson replied. "I learned about it during these proceedings. Yet you maintain that you never considered the financial implications of your relationship with a wealthy married man." The skepticism in Anderson's voice was palpable. Emerson sighed softly, her hand resting protectively over her belly. "Mr. Anderson, I grew up in a household where my grandmother taught me that character and integrity matter more than wealth. I was financially independent before meeting Jordan, with a degree and career skills that would support me regardless of his presence in my life. She looked directly at the judge rather than Anderson. When I realized I was falling in love with Jordan, my first instinct was to leave my position to avoid complication. It was Jordan who helped me see that what we found together wasn't wrong, just mistimed. How convenient that your grandmother isn't here to verify these supposed lessons in integrity, Anderson remarked, with barely disguised contempt. A flicker of pain crossed Emerson's face. My grandmother passed away 4 years ago, but she left her values with me. One of those values was honesty, which is why I'm here today, answering your questions under oath, without hiding from the truth of our relationship. Anderson's strategy shifted abruptly. The truth? Let's discuss that. Is it true that you've been experiencing unusual symptoms during this pregnancy? Symptoms that prompted additional testing? Jordan straightened in his chair, alarm coursing through him. How could Anderson possibly know about the follow-up ultrasound? Emerson's composure wavered for the first time. I'm not sure what you're referring to. My pregnancy has been healthy. Allow me to refresh your memory, Anderson said, retrieving a document from his table. Medical records from Dr. Sarah Chen, indicating concerns about elevated hormone levels and an unusual ultrasound reading at 12 weeks. Richard was on his feet. Instantly. Objection. Those records were obtained illegally. Ms. Rhodes never authorized their release. Judge Winters's expression darkened. Mr. Anderson approached the bench, defense counsel too. As the attorneys huddled with the judge, engaged in an intense, whispered conversation, Jordan caught Emerson's eye. He mouthed a silent, "I'm sorry," to which she responded with a small, reassuring smile that somehow calmed his racing heart despite the situation. After several tense minutes, Judge Winters addressed the courtroom. The document referenced by plaintiff's counsel is inadmissible and will be stricken from the record. Furthermore, I'm issuing a direct warning, Mr. Anderson. One more ethical violation, and I'll refer you to the Bar Association for disciplinary action. Anderson returned to his position, visibly restrained but still determined. Ms. Rhodes, let me ask directly. Is Mr. Castriel the father of your child? Yes, Emerson answered without hesitation. As was proven by the genetic testing your own client demanded. And is there anything unusual about this pregnancy that Mr. Castriel should be aware of? Anderson pressed, clearly fishing for information he suspected but couldn't prove. Emerson hesitated, glancing at Jordan. Something passed between them. A silent communication. A decision made together across the courtroom divide. Yes, she finally said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. Something we had planned to keep private until we were ready to share it. She took a deep breath. The unusual reading you mentioned was the doctor detecting a second heartbeat during an early ultrasound. We're expecting twins, identical twin boys. We only had confirmation at the 20-week anatomy scan, which is why we haven't announced it publicly. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Jordan couldn't suppress his smile at the astonished look on Anderson's face. Clearly, this wasn't the revelation he'd been fishing for. Twins, Anderson repeated, momentarily thrown off balance. And you're certain they're both Mr. Castriel's? Objection, Richard thundered, genuinely outraged now. This crosses every line of decency and professional conduct. Sustained, Judge Winters snapped. Mr. Anderson, that's your final warning. Anderson retreated, his calculated strategy in tatters. No further questions, Your Honor. Richard rose for cross-examination, his approach gentle where Anderson's had been aggressive. Ms. Rhodes, could you describe the nature of Mrs. Castriel's treatment of her husband during your employment in their home? Emerson's expression saddened. Mrs. Castriel frequently belittled Mr. Castriel both privately and in front of staff and guests. She criticized his business decisions, his appearance, his family background. She deliberately embarrassed him at social functions. "And why did you continue working in a household with such a toxic dynamic?" "Initially, I needed the job," Emerson admitted. "After my grandmother's illness, I had significant medical debts. Later, I stayed because—" She paused, looking directly at Jordan, "because I saw how lonely he was, how kind he remained despite everything. The staff became a sort of family for him, offering the respect and warmth he didn't receive from his wife. And after Mrs. Castriel discovered your relationship with Mr. Castriel, how did she react?" Emerson described the destruction of her artwork, the harassment at Mara's apartment, the false accusations that cost her her apartment, all without embellishment or unnecessary drama. The simple recitation of facts was more damning than any emotional appeal could have been. "Ms. Rhodes," Richard said, his final question gentle, "why are you here today? You could have refused to testify, avoided this public scrutiny. Why subject yourself to this?" Emerson's answer was directed not to Richard, but to Jordan. "Because the truth matters. Because what we have isn't shameful or calculated or wrong. It's real and worth standing up for, no matter how uncomfortable or public that stand might be." Her gaze never left Jordan's as she continued. "I'm here because I love him, not for his wealth or his status, but for his kindness, his integrity, his gentle spirit, for the way he treats everyone with respect regardless of their position, for the father I know he will be to our sons." Several jurors were visibly moved, one older woman even dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Judge Winters, though maintaining her judicial neutrality, nodded almost imperceptibly. "No further questions, Your Honor," Richard said quietly, returning to his seat. "Ms. Rhodes, you may step down," the judge instructed. As Emerson descended from the witness stand, her eyes locked with Jordan's in a moment of perfect understanding before she took her seat in the gallery behind him. The love and pride Jordan felt in that moment made him certain that whatever the court decided about the financial settlement, he had already won what truly mattered. "The court will recess for lunch," Judge Winters announced. "We'll reconvene at 1:30 for Ms. Castriel's testimony." As the courtroom began to empty, Jordan finally turned to Emerson, who waited with Mara in the first row of the gallery. "You were incredible," he said quietly, taking her hands in his. "I'm so sorry about the medical records. I never thought they'd stoop that low." "It's okay," Emerson assured him. "I was planning to tell your mother about the twins this weekend anyway. The cat's just out of the bag, a little earlier than expected." Jordan laughed softly, marveling at her ability to find humor even in this situation. "2 sons," he said, still adjusting to the public acknowledgement of what they'd known privately for weeks. "Double the blessing, double the joy, double the diapers, double the sleepless nights," Mara chimed in with a grin, standing protectively beside her cousin. "But worth every moment, I'm sure." Richard approached, his expression serious but optimistic. "I hate to interrupt, but that went even better than I'd hoped. The judge's reaction to Anderson's tactics was exactly what we needed." He glanced at his watch. "We should discuss strategy for the afternoon session. I think it's time to play our trump card." Jordan nodded, though reluctant to leave Emerson even briefly. "I'll meet you in the conference room in 5 minutes." When Richard had moved away, Jordan drew Emerson slightly aside. "Are you sure you're all right? That was brutal, especially the medical records." "I'm fine," she assured him, though he noticed the fatigue in her eyes. "Just ready for this to be over, so we can focus on what matters. Our family, our home, our future." "Soon," Jordan promised, brushing a quick kiss across her forehead. Today might be the turning point we've been waiting for. As he watched her leave with Mara, heading to a nearby cafe for lunch, Jordan felt a profound shift in his perspective. The wealth Vivian was fighting so viciously to claim suddenly seemed meaningless compared to the treasures he'd found with Emerson. Truth, respect, love, and the miracle of their sons growing beneath her heart. Whatever the afternoon brought, he knew with absolute certainty that he was already the wealthiest man in that courtroom, rich in the only currency that truly mattered. The afternoon session began with Vivienne's testimony, a masterclass in calculated victimhood. In a voice that trembled at precisely the right moments, she described her decade of devotion to a husband who had ultimately betrayed her, in the most humiliating way possible. Jordan listened impassively as she painted herself as the supportive wife who had sacrificed her own career ambitions to further his success, only to be discarded for a younger woman. And after 10 years of trying to give him a family, Vivian said, dabbing delicately at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, to learn that he had impregnated our household employee, not just with one child but 2, was beyond devastating. Maxwell Anderson guided her through carefully rehearsed testimony designed to emphasize Jordan's callousness and minimize her own vindictive behavior. No mention was made of her destruction of Emerson's artwork, her harassment, or her racial slurs. Instead, she described herself as a woman driven to understandable emotional reactions by overwhelming betrayal. When Anderson finished his direct examination, Richard approached for cross, his weathered face revealing nothing of his strategy. "Mrs. Castriel," he began pleasantly, "you've testified about your devotion to your husband and marriage. Would you characterize yourself as a loving wife?" Vivian's perfectly made-up face assumed an expression of wounded dignity. "Of course! I dedicated a decade of my life to Jordan and our marriage." "How would you define a loving relationship, Mrs. Castriel?" She blinked, clearly not expecting such a philosophical question. "One where both parties are committed to each other's happiness and well-being, I suppose." "Excellent definition," Richard agreed. "In that spirit, could you tell the court about the Zurich incident 3 years ago?" The color drained from Vivian's face. "I don't recall any particular incident in Zurich." "Allow me to refresh your memory," Richard said, retrieving a document from his table. "March 15th, 3 years ago. Mr. Castriel was hospitalized after collapsing during a business conference. His doctor diagnosed extreme exhaustion and stress-induced pneumonia, recommending immediate bed rest." Richard glanced up from the document. "According to Mr. Castriel's itinerary, you were scheduled to join him in Zurich that day. Did you?" Vivian shifted uncomfortably. "I believe I had a prior commitment." "Yes, according to these credit card statements. You had a commitment at a spa in St. Moritz, approximately 2 hours from your gravely ill husband," Richard observed. "In fact, you extended your spa stay rather than going to his bedside." Jordan understood how important that particular retreat was for my well-being, Vivian countered, though her confident demeanor had cracked slightly. Richard nodded thoughtfully. "And was the Bachmann Gallery opening also crucial to your well-being?" "The event you attended, rather than your father-in-law's funeral." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Vivian's lips thinned in displeasure. "I had a commitment as a patron. Jordan insisted I attend rather than cancel." "Interesting," Richard remarked, "because I have here an email from the gallery director thanking you for making time in your schedule at the last minute after learning about certain important collectors' attendance." For the next 30 minutes, Richard methodically contrasted Vivian's claims of wifely devotion with documented evidence of her absence during critical moments in Jordan's life. Illnesses, family emergencies, professional setbacks. The picture that emerged was not of a supportive spouse, but of a woman consistently prioritizing her social calendar over her husband's needs. Let's discuss your claims about sacrificing career ambitions, Richard continued, shifting focus. Prior to your marriage, you were employed as what, exactly? Vivian lifted her chin. I was in public relations. For how long? Approximately 8 months. And before that? Her hesitation was brief but noticeable. I was studying. According to your educational records, you attended 3 different universities but did not complete a degree at any of them, Richard noted. Is that correct? I chose to focus on supporting Jordan's career instead, Vivian replied stiffly. Richard nodded, his expression neutral. And this support included managing your household staff, overseeing the family finances, participating in business functions? Of course, Vivian affirmed. Yet according to testimony from multiple household employees, including Ms. Rhodes, you delegated all household management to staff. Financial records indicate Mr. Castriel managed all accounts personally, and your social media posts during business functions typically referenced networking for your charitable interests rather than supporting your husband's business relationships. Vivian's composure began to visibly fray. Are you suggesting I was a bad wife because I didn't cook his meals or balance the checkbook? This is the 21st century, Mr. Harrington. Not at all, Richard assured her. I'm simply clarifying what your support actually entailed, since you've made it central to your claim for half of Mr. Castriel's assets. When Richard finally returned to his seat, Vivian was noticeably rattled, her carefully constructed narrative of the devoted wife in tatters. Anderson attempted damage control with redirect questions, but the impression had been made. The court will take a 15-minute recess before closing arguments, Judge Winters announced, rising from the bench. During the break, Jordan conferred with Richard in hushed tones, while casting occasional glances toward Emerson, who sat conversing. Quietly with Mara, "Are you ready?" Richard asked as the judge returned. Jordan nodded, a calm certainty settling over him. More than ready. Mr. Anderson, your closing argument, Judge Winters directed once court resumed. Anderson rose with the confidence of a man accustomed to victory. Your Honor, this case is fundamentally simple beneath its sensationalized veneer. A man with significant wealth and power betrayed his marriage vows by engaging in an affair with a household employee, resulting in pregnancy. The prenuptial agreement signed by both parties clearly stipulates penalties for such infidelity. He gestured dramatically toward Jordan. Mr. Castriel now seeks to escape these contractual obligations through accusations against Mrs. Castriel's character. But let's be clear, whatever Mrs. Castriel's flaws as a wife might have been, they don't negate Mr. Castriel's contractual obligations. Anderson's voice hardened. The prenuptial agreement entitles Mrs. Castriel to 50% of all assets acquired during the marriage, plus additional compensation for the infidelity clause violation. Mr. Castriel made his choice. Now he must face its financial consequences, as the contract he signed requires. Thank you, Mr. Anderson, Judge Winters said, making brief notes. Mr. Harrington, Richard approached more sedately, his weathered face serious. Your Honor, prenuptial agreements are not sacred texts immune from scrutiny. They can be contested when circumstances involve coercion, misrepresentation, or unconscionability. He gestured to the evidence presented. This court has heard testimony documenting years of emotional abandonment Mrs. Castriel inflicted on her husband. We've seen evidence of her absence during his times of greatest need and her prioritization of social advancement over marital partnership. Furthermore, Richard continued, Mrs. Castriel's actions following the separation constitute harassment, property destruction, and discriminatory behavior. The prenuptial agreement contains mutual good faith covenants that Mrs. Castriel's documented pattern of behavior has repeatedly breached. Richard concluded confidently, "We ask the court to grant Mr. Castriel's petition for divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences, with equitable division of marital assets according to this court's standard practices, disregarding the punitive infidelity clause." "Thank you, Counselor," the judge said, setting aside her notes. "Mr. Castriel, would you please take the stand? I have some questions before rendering my decision." Jordan moved to the witness stand, acutely aware of Emerson's supportive presence behind him and Vivian's cold glare from the plaintiff's table. After Jordan was sworn in, Judge Winters studied him thoughtfully. "Mr. Castriel, I've reviewed the financial disclosures from both parties. Your company, Castriel Enterprises, represents the majority of the marital estate. Could you clarify the current ownership structure?" Jordan nodded, straightening slightly. "Castriel Enterprises was founded 7 years ago, during my marriage to Vivian. I own controlling interest as CEO, with minority shares held by investors and key executives, and the company's current valuation, approximately $320 million, according to our most recent assessment." A murmur rippled through the courtroom at the figure. Judge Winters raised an eyebrow. "So, under the prenuptial agreement's infidelity clause, Mrs. Castriel would be entitled to roughly $160 million plus penalties." "That's my understanding, yes," Jordan confirmed. Anderson smiled triumphantly, leaning to whisper something to Vivian, whose perfect lips curved with satisfaction. "One more question," the judge continued. "The Riverside estate where you and Mrs. Castriel resided, who holds the deed?" "The property is owned by Castriel Holdings," Jordan replied. "And who owns Castriel Holdings?" Jordan met the judge's gaze directly. "My mother, Eleanor Castriel." The courtroom erupted in surprised whispers. Anderson's head snapped up, his triumphant expression faltering. Judge Winters held up a hand for silence. "Please elaborate, Mr. Castriel." Jordan drew a steady breath. "When I was 25, before meeting Vivian, my father disowned me for refusing to join the family business. I started from nothing, living in a studio apartment, working night shifts while developing my business plan." His voice strengthened with quiet pride. "During this time, my mother secretly supported me, believing in my vision when no one else did. When Castriel Enterprises began to succeed, I created Castriel Holdings as a separate entity owned solely by my mother. All properties, including the Riverside estate, the vacation homes, the art collection, and the investment portfolio, are legally owned by Castriel Holdings." The judge's eyes narrowed with interest. "And what about Castriel Enterprises itself?" "While I maintain operational control as CEO, 65% of the company's shares are held in an irrevocable trust, with my mother as primary trustee." Jordan's expression remained composed. "This arrangement was established 5 years ago, after my father's passing, for estate planning and tax purposes." "Your Honor." Anderson was on his feet, face flushing with anger. "This information contradicts previous financial disclosures. The respondent is clearly attempting to shield assets." "Mr. Anderson," Judge Winters interrupted sharply, "I'm looking at certified ownership records submitted with the initial filing. This information has been available to you throughout these proceedings. If you failed to thoroughly review the documentation, that's not the court's concern." Vivian's perfect composure cracked completely, her eyes blazing with fury as she whispered urgently to her attorney. Anderson frantically flipped through papers, seeking something to counter this revelation. Judge Winters returned her attention to Jordan. "Mr. Castriel, to be clear, what percentage of your current assets would be subject to division under community property standards?" "My personal accounts, my direct ownership shares of Castriel Enterprises, approximately $35 million in total value," Jordan answered calmly. "Everything else is legally owned by my mother or the trust." The gallery erupted in excited whispers. Richard remained composed, having helped structure these arrangements years before, but Vivian's rage was palpable across the courtroom. Judge Winters called for order, then addressed Jordan once more. "Mr. Castriel, you seem remarkably unconcerned about potentially losing a significant portion of your personal assets." For the first time, Jordan smiled, glancing briefly toward Emerson. "Your Honor, what I've learned through this ordeal is that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or property deeds. I would gladly surrender every material possession to be free of a toxic marriage and build a life with someone who loves me for myself, not my financial status." The conviction in his voice resonated through the courtroom. "Money can be earned again. Time cannot. I've wasted too many years in an empty marriage, and I won't waste another day." A profound silence fell over the courtroom. Even Vivian seemed momentarily stunned by the simple sincerity of his words. Anderson recovered first, rising again. "Your Honor, regardless of these creative financial arrangements, the prenuptial agreement's infidelity clause still applies to Mr. Castriel's personal assets." "I'm well aware of contract law, Mr. Anderson," Judge Winters replied dryly. "I'll need 20 minutes to review these final disclosures before ruling. Court is in recess." The judge departed, leaving a buzz of excited conversation in her wake. Jordan returned to the defense table, where Richard greeted him with a subtle nod of approval. "Masterfully done," the older man murmured, "though I suspect your former mother-in-law will never forgive you for this particular chess move." Jordan glanced toward Vivian, who sat rigid with fury beside her increasingly agitated attorney. "She never liked me anyway," he replied quietly. Moving to the gallery, Jordan took the seat beside Emerson, ignoring the whispers and stares their proximity generated. "How are you holding up?" he asked, taking her hand. Emerson nodded, though fatigue shadowed her eyes. "I'm fine, but that revelation about your mother, you never mentioned the extent of the arrangements." "It wasn't relevant to us," Jordan said simply. "It was a business structure made years ago on my mother's insistence. She never trusted Vivian, said she had fortune hunter written all over her." He smiled faintly. "Turns out mothers know best." "She sounds like a remarkable woman," Emerson said. "I hope our sons inherit her foresight." "And your integrity," Jordan added softly, his hand moving to rest briefly on her rounded belly. 20. Minutes stretched to 30 before Judge Winters returned, her expression unreadable as she took her seat. "After reviewing all evidence presented, I'm prepared to rule," she announced, the courtroom falling instantly silent. "The petition for dissolution of marriage is granted on grounds of irreconcilable differences." She looked directly at Vivienne. "Regarding asset division, I find the prenuptial agreement's infidelity clause unenforceable due to Mrs. Castriel's documented pattern of emotional abandonment, which constitutes a prior breach of the contract's good faith covenants." Anderson began to object, but the judge continued without pause. "Additionally, Mrs. Castriel's post-separation conduct, particularly the attempted destruction of property and documented harassment, further invalidates her claim to punitive damages." She shuffled her papers. "Therefore, I order division only of assets legally owned by Mr. Castriel personally, excluding those held by Castriel Holdings or the Castriel Trust. Mrs. Castriel shall receive $15 million, representing fair compensation for her contributions to the marriage." Vivian's outraged gasp was audible throughout the courtroom. Anderson placed a restraining hand on her arm as the judge concluded. "This court also grants the permanent restraining order against Mrs. Castriel, prohibiting contact with Mr. Castriel, Ms. Rhodes, or their children. Divorce will be finalized upon submission of the signed settlement documents. Court is adjourned." The bang of the gavel was nearly drowned by the eruption of voices as reporters rushed from the courtroom to break the story. Jordan turned to Emerson, who sat with one hand pressed to her rounded belly. "It's over," he said softly. "Really over." Before she could respond, Jordan moved from his seat to kneel before her, right there in the crowded courtroom. A hush fell over those nearby as they realized what was happening. "I didn't plan this," Jordan began, taking both her hands in his. "But kneeling here, I realize there's no better place. This is where you bravely spoke our truth, where we finally won our freedom to build a future together." Tears welled in Emerson's eyes as understanding dawned. "Emerson Jade Rhodes," Jordan continued, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "You saw me when I was invisible, loved me when I'd forgotten how to be loved, gave me strength when I had none left. You're carrying our sons, giving me the family I've always dreamed of." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a ring with a simple but elegant diamond, different from the sapphire promise ring she already wore on her right hand. "I don't have the fortune everyone thought I had, just enough to give you and our children a good life. But I promise to love you completely, support your dreams unconditionally, and cherish every day we're given together." The courtroom had gone completely silent, all eyes on this unexpected moment of pure emotion amid the usual legal sterility. "Will you marry me, Emerson? Not because of our sons, not because of circumstances, but because I want to spend every day for the rest of my life loving you?" Emerson's free hand cupped his cheek, her eyes shining with tears and love. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Jordan. 1,000 times, yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, spontaneous applause broke out in the courtroom. Even some of the jaded court officers smiled at the genuine love evident between them. Across the room, Vivian watched with cold fury before turning sharply and exiting, Anderson hurrying after her. But neither Jordan nor Emerson noticed her departure. They were too busy beginning the rest of their lives together. Chapter 10. True Beginnings. Golden sunlight bathed the small beachfront property, turning the ocean beyond into a canvas of dancing diamonds. White chairs arranged in neat rows faced an arbor woven with jasmine and blue hydrangeas. It was nothing like the lavish society weddings Jordan had once attended. No celebrity guests, no extravagant displays of wealth, no photographers from glossy magazines. It was perfect. Jordan stood beneath the floral arch, watching the small gathering of truly beloved guests find their seats. His mother Elena sat in the front row, elegant in sage green, her silver hair gleaming in the sunlight. The pride in her eyes as she looked at her son brought a lump to his throat. The string quartet began playing, and all heads turned toward the path winding through the dunes. Jordan's breath caught as Emerson appeared, radiant in a simple ivory gown that flowed around her 8 months pregnant form. She carried a bouquet of blue hydrangeas, her dark skin glowing with both pregnancy and happiness. When they reached the arbor, her cousin Marcus placed Emerson's hand in Jordan's, the simple gesture sealing their connection. "You are my miracle," Jordan whispered. Emerson's smile illuminated her entire being. "And you are mine." Their vows were brief but heartfelt, promises made not with fancy rhetoric, but with sincere emotion. When Jordan slipped the simple gold band alongside her engagement ring, his hands were steady. When Emerson placed its matching counterpart on his finger, tears of joy sparkled in her eyes. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Their small gathering erupted in applause as they turned to face them, hands clasped tightly together. Later, as stars emerged in the velvet sky, Jordan led Emerson to a quiet spot near the water's edge. With gentle care, He helped her sit on a blanket spread over the sand, then settled beside her, one arm around her shoulders, the other hand resting protectively on her belly. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Beyond words," Emerson replied, leaning into his embrace. "If someone had told me a year ago that I would be sitting on a beach, married to the most wonderful man I've ever known, carrying his twin sons." She shook her head in amazement. "I would have said they were dreaming." "Sometimes dreams come true," Jordan murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Especially the ones you never dared to dream." As if in agreement, one of the babies kicked against his palm, followed quickly by his brother. They both laughed, the simple joy of that moment crystallizing into a perfect memory. "I love you, Mrs. Castriel," Jordan whispered. Emerson tilted her face up to his, her eyes reflecting the starlight above. "And I love you, Mr. Castriel, now and always." 3 months later, in the golden light of early dawn, Jordan paced the hospital corridor until the doctor finally emerged with a smile that told him everything before she spoke. "Congratulations, Mr. Castriel. Your wife and sons are doing beautifully." Moments later, Jordan stood beside Emerson's bed, overwhelmed by the sight before him, his exhausted but radiant wife cradling 2 perfect, tiny bundles with matching caps of dark hair. "Meet your sons," Emerson said softly. "Ethan and Noah Castriel." With trembling hands, Jordan carefully gathered one of his sons, marveling at the miniature features that somehow combined the best of both himself and Emerson. As the baby's tiny fingers wrapped instinctively around his own, Jordan felt tears of pure happiness tracking down his cheeks. "Thank you," he whispered to Emerson, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything, for them, for us." Emerson smiled up at him, love shining in her eyes despite her exhaustion. "No, Jordan, thank you for that stormy night when you took a wrong turn and found exactly where you were meant to be." As morning light streamed through the hospital window, highlighting the perfect tableau of the family they had created together, Jordan knew with absolute certainty that some mistakes weren't mistakes at all, but destiny's way of guiding souls to where they truly belonged.